no one can be as incompetent and have taken this country to a very bad place as the Conservatives. So the sooner we get them out, the better. And the sooner we get proportional representation, the better.
Is the right all right? You've got immigration rising even faster than inflation, talk of a softening Brexit, there's anger at a cost of living crisis after a decade of Tory government. The conditions couldn't be more perfect for a resurgence for a party of the right. You've got Nigel Farage even teasing a comeback. But why is his Reform Party at only, 6 or 7% in the polls? Now, obviously, the Conservatives are facing a huge challenge from the Labour Party at the next election. But how much should Rishi Sunak be worrying about the return of something we haven't seen for a while, a vote-winning party to the right of the Tories? Shortly, we'll speak to the leader of Reform UK, which is the party, of course, hoping to capitalise on all of that. But first of all, let's dig into the poll in the state of the nation. Tanya Abraham is from pollster's YouGov. Morning, Tanya.
Me.
And we've also got Tim Bale, Professor of Politics at Queen Mary University of London. Morning, Tim.
Good morning.
First of all, I just want to sort of pick through, just so people sort of remember where we are. If we go back to the last election, Conservatives, when they got the majority of 80 seats in 2019, that was in part, you could argue, because there wasn't a party from the right standing against them. This was Nigel Farage announcing his Brexit Party candidates wouldn't stand against Boris Johnson in 2019.
The Brexit Party will not contest the 317 seats the Conservatives won at the last election. But what we will do is concentrate our total effort into all of the seats that are held by the Labour Party, who have completely broken their manifesto pledge in 2017 to respect the result of the referendum, and we will also take on the rest of the Remainer parties. We will stand up and we will fight them all.
That was Nigel Farage. But of course, the relationship between the Tories and the smaller parties on the right has often been strained. This was David Cameron on LBC back in 2006 talking about UKIP.
I mean, UKIP, it's just a sort of, bunch of... they're just trying to make a bit of mischief. As far as I can see,
UKIP is a bunch of what?
Well, fruitcakes and loonies and closet racists, mostly.
Yeah, that didn't go down brilliantly well. So, Tanya, talk me through the polling, first of all. The Brexit Party obviously doesn't exist in the same way. It then became the Reform Party. So where did their voters go, and who's currently backing the Reform UK Party?
Well, at YouGov, the past kind of few polls have shown that Labour have retained their kind of lead at the moment. So around 48% are voting for Labour, 25% said they'd vote for the Conservatives, and 5% are saying they'd vote for Reform. Of the 2019 Conservative voters, so those who voted for the Conservative Party at the last election, around 12% say they plan to vote for Reform UK at the next election if the election was tomorrow. So this is what the snapshot is at the time today. We can see that they tend to be more, Reform voters tend to be more kind of older, maybe more likely to be male, and also more likely to have voted leave at the EU referendum. So at the moment, there is quite a small group overall who would consider voting for Reform, but we've seen over the past few polls that around a tenth of 2019 Conservative voters would consider voting for this party.
And how does that compare to the chunk that the Tories are losing to the Labour Party?
It's one of those things that we're keeping an eye on because of the vote share that we have seen over the past few months that Labour have got. Many kind of commentators in the debate around why isn't Labour doing better than they should be because of this. It will be interesting to see how this plays out. But talking about issues such as immigration, Britain's relationship with the EU, and how the government are dealing with all of these issues will be really important in terms of what the public think about the government and how this plays out and whether it's addressing the issues that people consider to be important.
Tim, you've been looking at this interplay between the Conservatives and parties on the right for some time. It's fair to say that is it fair to say that Nigel Farage was critical in Boris Johnson winning those seats and what became the Red Wall? Do you think that made a difference? Clearly, there's no self-publicist quite like Nigel Farage. How important has he been, do you think, to this political picture?
Well, I think he's been incredibly important over the years in the sense that I think fear of Nigel Farage and any of the various vehicles that he's headed up has forced Conservative politicians into taking a much harder line on Europe and indeed on immigration than perhaps they would otherwise have taken, not least for the sake of the economy. So you can argue that Nigel Farage to some extent helped push David Cameron into the Brexit referendum. And you can also argue that, you know, a lot of what Boris Johnson promised back in 2019 had a lot to do with making sure that the Brexit Party didn't repeat in the general election what it had done to the Conservatives in the European Parliament election in 2019. Indeed, you could argue that, you know, Nigel Farage was responsible for the Conservatives picking Boris Johnson as their leader in the first place. So he is incredibly important. I have to say, though, when it comes to the 2019 election, his decision not to stand against Conservative candidates didn't really make much difference to the Conservative Party, in the sense that it probably saved a handful of Conservative MPs their seats, perhaps. Ian Duncan Smith might have been one of them, Dominic Raab might have been another. But actually, the Brexit Party deciding still to stand against Labour in those seats meant actually the Conservatives didn't win a fair few seats that it might otherwise have won. And certainly when we were talking about the majority for the Conservative Party, instead of 80, it could have been about 130 in 2019 had the Brexit Party not existed and not stood in those Labour-held constituencies.
And that's because in those seats where you had sort of pro-Brexit, fed up with the Labour Party, Labour-held long-standing seats, the Conservatives could have hoovered up all of those disaffected voters, whereas actually every person who went off to the Brexit Party, you know, cost the Tories a vote, essentially.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's exactly what happened. So, and that is always going to be the fear of the Conservative Party. You know, that even if the Brexit Party or Reform, whatever Nigel Farage wants to call it, doesn't actually win seats, it takes enough votes away from the Conservative Party to mean that they actually lose seats to the Labour Party and even in some cases the Liberal Democrats.
And Tanya, let's just, in terms of the issues that arise, are there particular issues that people who go to the Reform, before that the Brexit Party, I mean, the fact that immigration is rising up the national agenda, concern about it being a big issue facing the country, does that correlate with people switching?
Yeah, I think issues are a good indicator as to what people consider to be the kind of the important issues to tackle by the government and also by other parties. Are other parties considering the way that the government addresses these issues to be satisfactory? We know that the economy, health and immigration, they've kind of been those top three issues for the past few months and even years, and it's indicative of what's happening in the country at the moment. So with issues such as immigration and in the past with issues like Britain's relationship with the EU, this has kind of shown in terms of what the public think are important, and consequently how the government and other parties would be dealing with it. And in YouGov polling, we've seen in the past that the Conservatives have typically been considered a better party to tackle issues such as immigration and, you know, taxation and defence and so on. But in the past kind of year or so, Labour have overtaken the Conservatives in issues such as immigration, where they have considered in the past to be quite strong. So it's a useful indication as to how strong and where people put the parties in the positions. And with parties like Reform UK, who have had a very strong stance on one issue, it will be interesting to see how the public consider those types of parties, how they would handle other issues which are not considerably a very, you know, well-known issue that's aligned to one party in particular.
Tanya, thank you for that. Tanya Abraham from YouGov. Right, well, let's speak to the man himself. We can speak to the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Morning, Richard.
Good morning to you, Matt. Very interesting hearing your contributors there with their analysis. I agree with some, not all of it.
Well, I was going to say, well, let's start with the good news for you then. You've got a Conservative government on its knees, 3 prime ministers in 6 months, immigration's on the up, inflation's on the up, illegal channel crossings, people coming across the channel's on the up, Brexit under threat, supposedly talk of Switzerland and so on. These are perfect conditions for you, aren't they?
Well, let's be clear. The last 4 things you've mentioned are actually bad news for the country, and is because of the incompetence of the Conservative Party. And yes, as I think some of your listeners may be aware, we've had record levels of new memberships joining. Just on Friday alone, we had 693 new members join after the news of the legal net migration numbers from the ONS released on Thursday. So, yeah, we represent what I think most people who voted for Brexit, what they wanted, which was to take control of our laws, money and borders. And none of those things, regrettably, have been delivered and are being delivered by the Conservative Party.
So why are you still only on 6% in the polls?
Well, look, it depends which polls you listen. On one a couple of weeks ago, Matt, we were on 9%. We're ahead of the Lib Dems, and it was interesting that nobody in the media wanted to sort of pick up. The trend is upwards. Essentially, we are, as Reform UK, as a new brand, we're only 22 months old. We're making progress. We're consistently ahead of the Greens. We're chomping at the Lib Dems. And as I say, we're the party on the up. And I think that, frankly, the Tories are the party that's on the way down. And we've made it very clear that we're going to stand everywhere except Northern Ireland. So well over 600 seats. I've got 560 candidates as I speak. And we're not standing down or doing deals with anybody.
You tweeted last week, dear Rishi and Jeremy, obviously Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, the more you betray Brexit, the more you destroy our economy, the more members we are signing. Yesterday, huge, second best in November so far. We aim to crush you. With thanks, Richard. How are you going to crush the Conservatives when, even when they're having a terrible time right now, they are still polling, 4-5 times what you are?
Well, as you well know, with first past the post, as one of your contributors was just explaining at the last general election, it can be very brutal if someone like ourselves takes significant numbers of votes away from the Conservative Party. And I know, because we're hearing it, Tory MPs are absolutely petrified in the industrial heartlands, the coastal communities, the Red Wall. They're petrified of the impact that we would have there. And likewise, in some of the Blue Wall seats, us taking lots of votes will mean that they'll lose those to quite possibly with more tactical voting to the Lib Dems. So the word crush, I think, actually, Matt, is wholly appropriate.
But isn't it actually Keir Starmer's Labour Party which is doing the crushing? The people are switching to Labour.
Well, look, it's a combination of factors, but the loser in all of this will be the Conservative Party. And given what they've done to the country after 12 years of incompetent rule, frankly, I think that's wholly appropriate. And we're very much, and indeed the Labour Party are moving towards it, but we very much support the move towards proportional representation, which is now, I think, more and more people recognise is the right thing to do, so that you get more parties, more discussion, more debate, more options. Competition's a good thing.
But I suppose what you need to try and weigh up is, given your ambitions, your policy aims, are you more likely to get some of those with a Conservative government or a Labour government? Because actually, if you stand in all these seats, you take the votes off the beleaguered Tory party, you end up with a Labour government, don't you?
And look, let's be very clear. No one can be as incompetent and have taken this country to a very bad place as the Conservatives. So the sooner we get them out, the better. And the sooner we get proportional representation, the better. So Rome's not built in a day. You can't have everything you want overnight. It would be nice if we could, but there we are. But that is the direction of travel. And I'm really optimistic, actually, Matt. Within 3 years of now, we could well have proportional representation. At which point, given the number of people who say to me, I like everything you stand for, but it's a wasted vote because of first past the post. The moment you get to PR, our vote share doubles. That's a very significant shift.
But then you're ultimately saying vote Labour, vote for Keir Starmer, the guy who wanted a second referendum and freedom of movement.
Absolutely not. No. Let's be very clear, Matt. I'm saying vote for what you believe in, not what you're afraid of. Vote Reform UK. The more votes we get, then the quicker we will get PR, the quicker we will get more seats in the House of Commons, so that we can make a difference in the way that this country is run and managed. You've got to grow your way out of a crisis. You can't tax your way out of a crisis. And we've got to get our own brilliant young people into work. We've got 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits at the moment, which is an absolute tragedy. It's 1 in 8 of the population. The focus needs to be getting our own people into work, not bringing in cheap, low-skilled immigration that the CBI seems to want. They seem to give up on young British people.
You mentioned you've got 693 new members. I know my colleague David Ivanovich has been trying to get the answer out of you. How many members have you actually got now?
Oh, no political party gives their total membership numbers. Goodness me, you know that.
Yes, they do.
Very well
The
indeed.
Conservative Party did when they had their contest. They've got 172,000. According to the Electoral Commission, the Labour Party's got 430,000, SNP 104,000, Lib Dem 74,000. Even Plaid says it's got 10,000.
They all seem rather round numbers. My understanding is that they don't give exact numbers and they don't give a rolling tally. Look, we've had over 7,000 new members join since Liz Truss was ousted, and we're delighted with that. And the more the merrier. They're very welcome. They recognise that we stand for lots of things. If people look at our detailed policy document on the website,
Richard, you're a straight talking kind of guy, Richard. You answer a straight question. All of the other political parties, in one form or another, whether it's in their submissions to the Electoral Commission or we know from the Conservatives because of the number of people who voted, why wouldn't you just say how many members you've got? You've said you've got enough, you're having record days and you're going to crush the Tories. How many members have you got?
Yeah, I've told you, we've taken on a lot of new members, over 7,000. It changes by the hour, and we're delighted with that. So that's...
But what's the total? If you've got more than Plaid, if you've got more than Plaid, Plaid say they've got 10,000 members, they told the House of Commons. Have you got more than 10,000?
I can confirm that we've got way more than Plaid that you've just mentioned.
Have you got more than the Lib Dems? They're on 74,000.
That's all I'm going to give you.
Okay. So are you going to stand yourself at the next election?
Absolutely. Matt, you're not keeping up. You're not keeping up, my friend. I've already confirmed weeks ago that I'm standing at Hartlepool. If you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see that I'm standing there. I've been campaigning there. Absolutely. That's where I stood in 2019.
But you're not going to win, are you?
I'm delighted to be campaigning back there.
You're not going to win.
Sorry? You're
not going to win. You said a minute ago that because of first past the post and so on, you won't win any seats, and you're hoping for a Labour government that introduces proportional representation.
I didn't say any of those things. I don't know where you got that. I didn't say I wasn't going to win. I think we've got a great chance. We came a very close third. The Hartlepool race will be a two-horse race. We're essentially starting 2 years out. Last time I started 6 weeks out. I think we've got a cracking chance. What I'm saying is, first past the post is difficult. We all know that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you want to shape an influence, you've got to be on the ballot paper. And we will be on the ballot paper absolutely everywhere. And we're saying to people, look, if you believe in growing the economy, if you believe in looking after British workers, if you believe in a sensible, lawful immigration policy that recognises and brings in people for the skills you genuinely need, but that you train British people up, then that's the right way to grow the economy, and that's what we stand for.
Richard Tice, really appreciate your time today. Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK. Let's check back in now with politics professor Tim Bale from Queen Mary University of London. Tim, I mean, clearly, of course, Richard Tice is going to tell us that they're on the up and they're doing very well, although he wouldn't tell us quite exactly how many members he'd got. Is it a mistake for the Conservatives to worry about the Reform Party? There's a risk that they spend all their time worrying about what's happening on the right while shedding far more votes to Labour on the left.
Well, I think that is a really good point. And it's also, I think, the case that they can spend far too much time worrying about immigration, although clearly, it is going up the list of voters' worries, as you suggested. It's nowhere near the kind of level it was back in 2015, which triggered the result in the 2016 referendum, and it's nowhere near what it was. And to be honest, although people do care about immigration, in particular about the small boats coming across, compared to the economy at the moment and issues of inflation, for example, it's just nowhere near as important. And it's those things I think the Conservative Party really has to think about tackling.
Well, let's speak to one of them now. Damian Green, Conservative MP. He heads the One Nation group of Tory MPs on the left of the party. Morning, Damian.
Morning.
So we've been talking about high immigration, cost of living crisis, softening Brexit. It's all ripe for a return of Nigel Farage, isn't it?
Well, I think that point that in the end it's the economy, stupid, is always worth remembering. That certainly those who care most about immigration and who therefore may be tempted by Nigel Farage tend to be very vociferous and on the email. But I think the central political problem at any time is the economy. And if you get that right, then other problems lessen in importance.
I suppose the problem is that the economy's not looking great either, is it?
Well, yeah, I mean that I think is the central issue. I think clearly Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement was a lot better than Kwasi's mini budget. So we have taken the first steps towards recovery on that. But I agree, it's only the first steps, and there's a long way to go. But I think getting that right would be better than certainly than panicking and saying, "Oh, Nigel Farage is threatening to come back. Let's adopt a load of Farageist policies." Because that will alienate at least as many people as it attracts, and possibly more. And in the end, if we're worried about people voting Labour or Lib Dem, we need to get our own policies right rather than just sort of lurching around chasing other people.
And you talk about Farage's policies. Actually, if you came up with things like banning onshore wind farms, flying people back to Rwanda, the sort of things that maybe we'd have expected a Farage's party to put forward before. Do you worry about the direction of the Conservative Party?
I think the key test for Rishi in the future, he's stabilised the government, which was the first test, and now he does have to set out a sense of direction. I hear that in the new year we're going to get that. We're going to get some sort of big, thoughtful speeches about where he wants to take the country, and I do think that's essential. We need to establish not just that we can be competent in a way that has not seemed on the cards over the past few months, and I think we're making big progress about that. But actually, we do need a sense of direction as well.
Damian Green, really appreciate your time today there. Damian Green, Conservative MP, who heads the One Nation group of Tory MPs, with news of it's good to know that in all else in politics, the New Year relaunch is never far away. And it sounds like Rishi Sunak has got one coming as well. Tim Bale, finally, what would you expect to see in Rishi Sunak's series of New Year speeches? I've heard that one before.
Oh God. Well, I mean, if you've only been in post a few weeks and you're talking about a relaunch, I think you're in big trouble. So, I mean, as Damian says, it really does have to be whatever else he talks about. The economy's stupid. Anything else, I think, will be useful, but not really that important.
Tim Bale, really good to speak to you. Politics professor from Queen Mary University of London. We also heard from Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, and Tanya Abraham from YouGov.